Hey Pathfinders, our book has finally arrived. The Pathfinder's Journey is live on Amazon right now and ready for you. If you have already purchased our book and or left us a review, we thank you endlessly. If you haven't, what are you waiting for? The ebook sale of 99 cents won't last long, so head over to Amazon today to get your copy. Be sure to download the free 7-day reading journal to make your journey even more worthwhile. Well, that's all for now. Check out the link in the show notes to get your copy of The Pathfinder's Journey today. Enjoy the show.
If you have already gone through that phase and your spouse hasn't, you want to make sure that you're putting things on their level.
Welcome to the On Purpose Investor Podcast with your host, Eric and Tiffany Vogel. We spent several hard years building a rental property portfolio so we could have more time with our family and live our ideal life. Finding your path can be difficult, so we're here to help guide you along the way with lessons, tips, and tricks to design and implement your dream life through real estate investing. Now sit back, turn up the volume, and get ready for this episode of the On Purpose Investor. Welcome back, Pathfinders, to the On Purpose Investor Podcast with your host, Eric.
And Tiffany.
Great to have you back to episode 11. Today we're going to be asking the question, does your spouse share your vision? Before we get started today, I'm going to give a brief disclaimer. Most of our conversation today is going to talk about your relationship with a spouse, but it's not limited to just a spouse. It could be any support person in your life, no matter who they may be. So before we dive into is your spouse disinterested or are they completely against it? I want to share a short story of how Tiffany and I weren't necessarily aligned in one of my visions I had. Just to give you just a little backstory, we bought a house from a seller that needed to walk away from a property and wanted to leave everything. There was an emotional tie that they needed to just be away from it. And we were able to come in and buy the house with everything in it. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing.
And everything in it included 2 vehicles.
There were 2 vehicles and then just a full array of all household items.
Yeah, we found some good finds in that house for sure.
Yes.
One of the vehicles was in good shape, didn't take a lot of work, and we were able to sell it on owner financing to someone really as a young woman, helped her get her start in life. So that was really fun and cool to help her out. But the other vehicle. Oh,
that other vehicle, let me tell you, it was a 2001 Jeep Cherokee Sport.
Let me chime in real quick. So Eric's dad is a diesel mechanic. Eric grew up learning how to work on cars to the point of go walk to the parts store to buy this thing you need to fix your car with no real guidance. Like he was just kind of thrown into it and told to figure it out. And his dad was there to help, but
yes,
it was very...
And I had a Haynes manual usually to walk through and figure out, okay, how do you do this? Oh, it's in chapter 6. So I would walk through a Haynes manual and really self-figure out how to work on these vehicles with my dad's guidance. And when I saw this Jeep, I was like, oh, wow, this is great.
Plus you had a Jeep that you loved. And it got totaled.
That's right.
So this was a very sentimental moment.
It was. And one day I was out there letting the cars idle because I would only go to the property once every other week or so. And just wanted the cars to idle so that they could, just run. And one day when they were out in the backyard idling, the Jeep exploded. The radiator, one of the hoses exploded and it just made a big mess.
Goo everywhere.
Right. And I didn't have all of my tools and stuff up there to work on it. So I rented a U-Haul trailer and towed it to the house.
And to add some context, at this point, I was 8 months pregnant roughly with our first child. So the car was packed up for the hospital. Everything was ready to go. And Eric decides he's going to start tinkering on this car.
Yeah, and I pull it to the bottom of the driveway where I'm not blocking anyone, and I pull the radiator out. I replace the radiator. I put a new thermostat in it. I do all the mechanic things to it.
Our driveway is a straight shot. It's one lane. There's a fence on one side and house on the other. So there's no, if the car's blocked in, it's blocked in. You're not getting it out unless you've got a crane.
Yeah, so I work on this Jeep, I get it running, and, occasionally I need to take it out of the driveway and drive it a little bit to see how it functions, to see if there's any other work that needs to be done. And intermittently, I would park it behind Tiffany's car, knowing that, I can move it because it was running, I can move it. And this one night, I needed to do a flush on the radiator, which meant taking the thermostat out and having to get a new gasket and whatnot. So I pulled the thermostat off and the gasket broke. So I knew I needed to get another gasket, but I flushed the radiator and I needed to get to the parts store. Thing is, Tiffany's car was blocked, but I still had my truck over on the side street. So I went inside and was going to go to the parts store to get this gasket. And she said, no, I don't think you need to be leaving. I'm about to be going to bed and we need to be ready for this baby to come.
Yeah, I had some contractions. We'd already been to the hospital a couple days before. Baby wasn't coming yet, but we knew it was kind of one of those any moment now the show was gonna start. So I go to bed and an hour or two later, my water breaks. And I yell for Eric, and Eric had just come in. But the problem was my car's loaded up with everything for the hospital. The car seat, all the bags, my big yoga ball, all the things we needed. But you can't get it out because the Jeep's in the way.
And the Jeep wouldn't run because I needed the gasket.
And I had told him, do not block my car in because we might need to go to the hospital. And he did.
Yeah.
Eric pulls the truck into the front yard, freaking out, scrambling, trying to move as fast as he can, moves everything out of the car into the Jeep. It all worked out fine. But this was one of those moments that I was just not on board with the vision that Eric had because I was about to have a baby.
That's
I was
right.
a little focused on something else, but it all worked out. We wound up selling the Jeep to a nice guy, made a little bit of money on top of the significant income we made on flipping the house. So it all makes a good story for the memoir one day.
But all in all, she wasn't necessarily on board with my vision for this Jeep because it was a smoker's car. It was nasty. It was cruddy. And all I wanted her to do was to ride around in this Jeep that I was fixing up. And I was very proud of it. I loved working on this Jeep. I enjoy working on cars in general. And my vision sometimes is restoring old things. I think that's why I like renovating houses so much, is that I get to bring old things back to life. And
I was not about sitting in a car that's sticky with nicotine tar from 15 years ago while I'm 9 months pregnant.
yeah, so we were unaligned on that vision. And ultimately it led to a little bit of a crisis situation. Even though she wasn't on board with that vision, that part of my life, we still maintained a healthy relationship somehow.
Right. Well, so today we want to talk about some tips you can use when your spouse is just kind of disinterested in your vision and your business and what you're trying to accomplish and how to get some more support. And then also just talk through when your spouse is against what you're doing. Like they have hesitations and it's not just that they're not supporting, that they're actively saying, they don't want you to pursue this path.
Yeah. So first we'll start with your spouse is disinterested, but they're neutral.
Yeah.
How do you either gain more support or get them involved a little bit?
So I think including your spouse, involving them in the business is key. We recently just wrapped up a project and Eric was fully in charge of all of the renovations. Usually I had a little bit of a hand in it, but having a son and managing everything else I'm managing, I just didn't have bandwidth to be involved this time. So the house is 5 minutes from our house. So probably once a week or so, Eric would take me over, show me the property, let me see the progress that was happening. So I'm not just over here writing checks thinking, man, so much money's going out. I get to see the tangible proof of what's happening. And we'd take Otto with us. So he got to see the house and run around, and obviously when there weren't tools everywhere and nails. We also would make a trip to the park after and let him play, and all of us as a family got to enjoy some time together before the end of the quote-unquote work day.
Right.
So we converted Eric's time at the house. He would tinker and do a few things he needed to do and just kind of inspect the work of our crew. But he involved me. Our son got to play a little bit at the house, and then we also made it into a family event by going to the park after.
Right. Experiencing success for yourself is great, but sharing that success with your significant other or spouse makes it that much sweeter. Lonely is the man on top of the mountain when he has his riches and success by himself. But you put that man or woman on top of that mountain of success with their family or loved ones around them, and there you have a fulfilled person. So in bringing your spouse to your projects, including them on different ventures that you're doing, you get to share that success with them. And this is if your partner is disinterested, but they're neutral, they're quasi-supportive. So
we went on a cruise 2 years ago. It actually just popped in my Facebook feed. That was 2 years ago. And I remember one of our friends brought his wife, and she joined us for the exchangers meeting.
That's right.
And for those of you that don't know, an exchangers meeting is where you come with something you have and trade it for something you need. So you might trade a course or a seminar that you have to offer for an option on a house, or it's really just exchanging without using money as the medium of exchange.
Right.
And this friend's wife she got engaged and in it, and she was having an absolute blast in this meeting.
Right.
And I think it really got her engaged and involved in the business in a way that she hadn't been previously.
Right. And we don't know that necessarily, but it was great to see her get involved like that.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Other ways to get your spouse a little more on board is scratch their back, and maybe they'll scratch yours.
Yeah, so I know Brandon Turner from Bigger Pockets talks a lot about how he got Heather on board. And he says he asked her to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad in exchange for reading the Twilight books. He had no interest in reading them, but in order to get Heather on board, he was willing to make that sacrifice of his time to get her to read the book that really shifted his mindset.
And that's not necessarily just scratching each other's backs. I think it's showing a mutual respect.
Right.
For what each other likes.
Yeah.
I'm not good with the
words,
vocabulary stuff sometimes. If Tiffany asked me to read something in exchange for me wanting her to read something, or if I wanted her to help me on a renovation and I said, I'll help you do this if you help me do that, I think it's offering yourself and your time and your mental energy. If you can give that to your spouse, that's a huge sign of respect and a huge sign of, I want to be in this with you.
Yeah, it's making a sacrifice because you're asking your spouse to sacrifice something. So it's the give and take that goes in a relationship.
Yeah. And one of the last things I want to talk about is create an easy understanding of what you're doing. Because everything real estate investing wise is not easy to understand. There are so many different facets to buying the property. There are thousands of ways to buy a property. There are thousands of ways to renovate a property. The list could go on about how different it could be. And you might understand all of them because you surround yourself with real estate investors that talk this language and you can communicate it very well. But if you go home and you're speaking to your spouse and you're talking about utilizing options and
ARV and Reno budgets and
you're talking in a language that they don't speak. That's if you go to a restaurant that is ethnic of sorts and they're using a different language, it can probably be frustrating sometimes to try to understand what they're saying. But if they were speaking to you in a way you understand in your language, you feel more comfortable. So find a way to communicate in their language.
Yeah. Yeah, I know when we first started going to our local meetup, we would always call each other after the meeting and just try to digest because there was so much vernacular that we didn't know. So many things that were just above our heads. And we were deciphering through it together. But if you have already gone through that phase and your spouse hasn't, you want to make sure that you're putting things on their level and speaking to them on where they're at. I mean, you wouldn't talk to your fifth grader like you would a college student. So treat your spouse with the respect to show them, I understand you're here at this different level than where I am right now. Let me carry you up to meet me where I'm at.
Right. I like to call this the KISS method. And a lot of people use the KISS method. Keep it super simple. Or as most people I know say, keep it simple, stupid. Or keep it stupid, simple. Another way to make it easier for them to understand is to show them how when you do a renovation, show them on paper. Here's how much it costs. Here's how much it costs to purchase the property. Here's what it's costing us to renovate it. Here's what the outcome is going to be. And here's how we as a partnership or a relationship or our family, here's how we are all going to benefit from this. Yeah. And when you can share in that benefit, they will likely be supportive of it.
Yeah. To take it, I guess, another level, when your spouse is not just neutral, but they aren't for you pursuing this path, you want to communicate in a style that resonates with them. So if you're going to break down the renovation budget and they're not a numbers person, do not go line by line and say it's going to cost me $200 to replace this toilet.
Right. Yeah. You want to break it down and say, well, it's going to cost $15,000 to get the house painted and put some new toilets and plumbing in.
Yeah. You want to use the right amount of data and stories and big ideas to resonate with your spouse. So for me, I am very much a numbers person when it comes to expressing the benefits to me. If Eric has a deal he wants to present and I'm not fully on board, coming to me and painting this beautiful picture of what the end product of the house will look like means nothing to me. I don't care what the house will look like. I want to know how much money it's going to cost and what the reward's going to be.
The day I put an ROI at the end of a spreadsheet was the day I knew I won.
Right.
Because when I was able to show a good ROI on a project and she said, well, when are we offering?
Right.
I was like, oh, this is how I communicate well with her. I don't just tell her, oh, it's going to be a fun project and we're going to make great income off of this home. When I could show her and break it down and say, here's the ROI. Here's what our cash out is going to be at the end. This is a true BRRRR, which is buy, rehab, rent it out, refinance, repeat. When we were in that process, when I could show these numbers clearly and show that it is going to be a success.
Right.
That's whenever Tiffany was more supportive of me choosing some of these projects.
Yeah, but for me, if I have a situation that I'm trying to get Eric on board, I have to paint the picture of what life will look like. So it's not, hey, we'll get $400 a month in cash flow. It's, hey, we can go buy this RV and that cash flow will cover our monthly note and we'll get to travel with our family. And I have to paint more of what life will look like in the big picture and make it very visual because that's what resonates with him. So we have figured out communication styles that resonate. And a great profiling tool that you can use with this is the DISC profile. We'll put a link in the show notes to it, but it breaks down the best way to communicate with someone. And we used it a lot in my W-2 in the sales process. Because if you have someone looking for numbers, you want to give them numbers. But if they're not a numbers person, they're a big idea person, giving them numbers just makes them want to jump out of the window, basically.
Yeah. If you came to me with a project and it was just numbers, I wouldn't even think about doing it.
No, because you just glaze over.
I'm like, well, I don't really know what I'm looking at. I don't know how I benefit from this. So I would not be supportive.
Right.
So let's change gears here. Let's now talk about your spouse, and they are vehemently against it. They do not want you pursuing this. They are against it. They don't want you doing it. And you want to get them turned around. You may not want to get them on board with you. You may not need them to be in your business, but maybe you just want them to gain a little understanding about what you're doing and how it's benefiting. And you just want a support person. Or maybe you want someone in your business with you and you want that person to be your spouse. So we're going to talk through some things on transforming that image they have of you. So first off, we'll talk about safety and security. People feel most supportive of their spouse in any situation when they feel they are safe and secure. If you're going on a venture that is risky and your spouse sees it as risk and all they can see is the potential loss, the potential change in their life that is negative, and they don't see the benefit, and all they see is, I will not be safe or secure at the end of this journey, they are likely going to be against it.
Right. So if you tell your spouse you need $20,000 to purchase a home and you're going to put the renovation on credit cards with 0% interest, in essence, what we did starting out, and your spouse is not okay with that, they're just going to see, oh my gosh, we're going to have this credit card debt with a 25% interest rate and we're going to lose $20,000. They're not going to see that you could potentially make a few $100s a month in cash flow. And by only seeing that negative side, they're not going to be on board because basically their lenses and their glasses
That's right.
are focused on the negative aspects. And yeah, that $20,000 in that credit card debt is not going to make you rich. But if you know your fundamentals and do the deal right, and it's a true BRRRR, and you're able to pull out some of that cash at the end of it, you might leave $5,000 in the deal, but you're left with a significant return on that cash, and you're progressing towards your goal of achieving financial independence.
Yeah, so clarity brings about security.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you provide clarity to help make your spouse feel safe and secure?
And show them how it works.
That's right. You show them how it's going to happen, step by step, if they need that.
Right. And I think getting into your local community and finding people who used a similar strategy as the one you're pursuing and having dinner with them and talking to your spouse about how they made it work will help them see this is not you just going off on a crazy Wild West horse-drawn Oregon Trail venture.
Right, get rich quick scheme, and you might feel your spouse is going to get wool pulled over their eyes or something. But showing them how it will happen by taking them to meetups, by taking them to RIAs, take them places with you
where people have
experienced success.
Yes.
And you're going to do even better if you can find couples that have experienced success and they can share in their journey with you.
Yeah.
So after being able to provide safety and security, because at the end of the day, our primal instinct is we need safety and we need security along with love. But why are they disinterested? You need to get to the root of why they are so against what you are doing. So one of the big things that you can do, an exercise you can do to figure out why anything, is to do the why exercise.
Yeah, and that is, we need a better name for that than the why exercise. But this is something we've encountered a lot in our investing career. I can very distinctly remember a conversation we had at a seminar with a good friend, and he just drilled into us. And the point of the exercise is you ask a question and then you ask why.
So let's do this exercise live right now.
So for me, I know my risk levels changed significantly after we had our son.
All right. So we're going to do this like we're having a conversation and we are not on board, right? So Tiffany, can we go buy this house next week and we're going to need to put up $30,000 and I'm going to need to be gone 3 nights a week. Can we do this?
I don't know. I don't think it fits with our goals right now. And I don't know that we have the disposable income to throw $30,000 at it.
So why are you hesitant to find that $30,000 and put that money toward it?
Well, I know we have money on our HELOC that we could use towards it, but that HELOC is supposed to be our buffer. It's supposed to be our, oh crap, we can't pay the bills this month. Let's use that as our buffer. We need to put in a new AC, which I know is coming, by the way. So I'm hesitant to use that money. That's our safety net.
So why are you hesitant to use that money?
Because we might need it for something else.
Why do you feel like we might need it for something else? Do you not feel confident we can make it work?
I'm sure we can make it work, but I need that security of that money there.
So what we have discovered is that Tiffany is okay with us doing the deal.
It's the $30,000 that's the hang up.
It's the $30,000, right?
And I think if you presented to me, okay, yes, we need $30,000, but the cash flow from this property will cover the note of that $30,000 and then some, and will get us closer to our goals of our big number, that would frame it up in my mind as, okay, yes, it is a risk, but the reward is worth the risk.
Right. And your risk tolerance changed a lot with Otto.
Yeah, significantly.
And doing the why exercise with you now might look a little different when it comes to time commitments.
Right. Time is definitely a very different commodity for me now.
Right. And so our listeners out there that have kids and are trying to get started and trying to get their spouse on board with what they're doing, and maybe you got a few kids at home, how is this why exercise going to help them get their spouse on board when it comes to sacrificing time? How would you go through it with me if we were doing a why exercise and I'm trying to show you if we sacrifice time now, we will gain more time later?
Right. I think it's definitely a harder situation when kids are in the equation because our time sacrifice came really before we had our son. I think the ability to provide a richer life makes it worth it. Yes, you're going to miss things with your kids to achieve that. But let's say you have pre-elementary school age kids and you miss some of their firsts. That's huge. And I don't want people to experience that. But if giving that up gives you the ability to take 2 weeks off every summer and travel with them and create those memories that your kids will remember, they're not going to remember the early days.
Yeah.
It might be worth it for you. I'm not going to say it is or it isn't, but the trade-off of time now for more time later could be something worthwhile.
Right. So the why exercise helps you dig down deep to the real root of fears, insecurities, and doubts of your significant other or spouse. It's going to help you figure out, are they really just against it that it's your idea? Maybe they just are not a fan of your big ideas. Maybe you've had failed, ventures in the past and they're just not into hearing about your happenings. But I highly doubt that's the case, because I believe all of the whys will truly come down to, is it safety and security? They don't want the risk.
Right.
They want to be able to live comfortably without having to risk things. But communicate with them in a very positive way that this is not necessarily that big of a risk in all consideration.
Well, and I think it's really listening to them talking and then communicate what you heard back. Because I know we've done this exercise and you communicate something back and I'm like, that's nowhere close to what I said. Like, you heard something crazy.
And there's this exercise we are going to be starting soon. That I said this, you heard that. And that's an exercise that we'll probably talk about it on future episodes, how it went with us. But effective communication is tough, especially when you're communicating in a different language. You're not speaking to them in a way that they understand. Right. So communicating effectively is important, but communicating consistently is even more important.
It all comes down to respect at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And try to put yourself in your spouse's shoes and really understanding where they're coming from and their fears and hesitations, and putting yourself where you were when you first started.
Right.
We've been having great conversations with a good friend who's starting this journey, and we are trying to put ourselves back in the shoes that we had when we first started investing, and how our mindset shifted. There's a quote that it happened suddenly, or it happened slowly, then suddenly. And that's how it really happened for us. It was very gradual. And then all of a sudden, bam, our mindset was completely different from what it used to be.
And it wasn't reading just one book that completely changed our mindset. And a lot of people say Rich Dad, Poor Dad changed their whole mindset. And for me, it was a series of books.
Right.
For me, it was, and I've mentioned all of these books before, Rhinoceros Success, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Those are the two main ones that helped me change my mindset. But it was also attending the real estate meetup, hearing other people and seeing the success. And then my biggest mindset shift had to come from figuring out, is debt good or bad, and how to delineate good debt from bad debt.
So really putting yourself back in that place, because it's almost like once you cross that threshold, it's hard to go back, because we view money in a completely different way than we did 5 years ago.
That's right.
So try just giving your spouse some grace and working with them where they're at, and offer them some incentives is another great strategy that I've heard.
Yeah, you get a big payout on a flip or a cash out refi, or you come into some money, set some of that aside for your family.
Yeah.
For your spouse.
So I've heard of people making $40,000 on a flip, and then they go blow $5,000 on a family vacation.
Well, with rising gas prices, it might be more like $10,000 these days. But what's 25% of that profit when compared to the support of your family, the support of your spouse?
And you're doing all of this, I'm assuming, for your family,
right,
and your spouse, and your life, your dream life. And most people have travel as part of their dream life. So give yourself and your family a taste of that dream life now to keep fuel in your tank and keep you motivated and keep them motivated.
One thing that might help you to communicate more effectively with your spouse is to, jump back to one of our first couple of episodes where we talk about the top 10. Do a top 10 exercise with your spouse. See what drives them. See what motivates them. You probably know your spouse pretty well, but do you really know what makes them truly happy? There's 10 lines on there. And I'm going to put a link to our top 10 forum in the show notes. And print it out and just sit down with your spouse and do this exercise with them. I think it'll be very helpful, and you might see that you don't know everything that makes them happy, or you don't know how to effectively communicate, and you don't know what makes them feel safe and secure. And so by getting the communication down, by being able to foster to their needs, I think you're going to see that your spouse is going to be more willing to get on board.
Yeah. I think a lot of times, not just you don't know what your spouse wants, your spouse doesn't even know what they want.
Yeah.
I know for us, like when we started, doing the top 10 was really eye-opening for each of us. And even now, so much has shifted in our life that I feel like we need to just kind of reset and maybe redo our top 10, redo our vision, and make sure we're working towards the right goals, because a lot has changed in our life in the past year, and having a kid turns everything upside down.
Yeah, it does.
In a great, hectic, chaotic way. And revisiting that top 10 and your vision frequently is important to keeping you on task.
So hopefully you could take what we talked about in this episode to apply it to your life. Whether your spouse is neutral, disconnected from what you're doing, they're not necessarily against it. Or maybe you're on the other side of that and your spouse is vehemently against what you're doing and they're unsupportive. Hopefully these tools that we've talked about today, you can get your spouse on board.
All right. Well, that's all we have. So thanks, y'all, for hanging out with us and listening to us talking about, does your spouse share your vision? How can you make the time you spent with us worthwhile? Is it finding your spouse's communication style? Introducing your spouse to your business and goals? Finding a way to show you'll be able to provide for them, or something else? Don't let the time you just invested go to waste. You only get one life, so live it purposefully. That's all we have for you today. See you next time.
Are you ready to discover and build your dream life? Then it's time to become a Pathfinder. Head over to onpurposeinvestor.com and sign up for our newsletter to get tips and tricks to help you find your path and get the latest from our blog. If you haven't already, we'd really appreciate an honest review on your favorite podcast app. If you're enjoying this show, share it with friends, family, and fellow investors. See you next time at the On Purpose Investor Podcast.